Good morning and welcome to another edition of Capital Preview, brought to you by MediaCom. My name is Bill Peard. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Iowa Cable and Telecommunications Association, and we're here this morning to talk about issues that affect Iowans with our representatives and state senators. Our guest today is Representative Bobby Kaufmann, Republican from Wilton. And Mr. Kaufmann, good to see you this morning, and thanks for coming in.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Bobby, I'm just going to kind of jump in right away with
Sure.
some things that I know that are important to you that you're working on up at the Hill. The first one is medical cannabis. I think everybody is talking about medical cannabis right now.
Absolutely. Well, it's an issue that not only is a moral issue because you have folks that need access to this medicine, but it's also an issue politically that's becoming increasingly popular. I think something close to 75% of Iowans support medical cannabis. I was happy to cast a yes vote in Commerce Committee, and it's my hope that that bill will get an opportunity for a floor House vote and for a chance to go down to get signed by the governor.
And where is that now in the legislative process?
There's a version in the Senate that's ready for floor debate. There's a version in the House that's ready for floor debate. I suspect that they potentially could end up in a conference committee so that both sides could hammer out the differences.
Yeah. So, and does that have to be done before the second funnel next Friday, or?
Yes, we'll have 2 weeks.
Yeah. So you got some work ahead of you.
Yes, we do.
All right. And I know you chair the Government Oversight Committee, correct?
Yes,
So
correct.
I know you have a couple things that you're investigating. So why don't you kind of go through those a little bit and tell
Sure.
us what's on your docket for investigations for that?
Well, we made a commitment this year to the Oversight Committee to be very active. Traditionally, in years past, the committee had taken up one issue at a time, and I decided that we wanted to be much more active. So we've assigned what's called legislative panels, investigative panels, one Democrat and one Republican, that are tasked with looking at some of the smaller issues. But we as a committee as a whole are beginning an investigation into the Midwest Academy down in Keokuk. This was a boarding school that was operating in the dark, and we found out they had over 70 accusations of both sexual and physical abuse, but also of suicide attempts, assault on the teachers, and the kids just shouldn't have to be exposed to that. So we're investigating, number one, how they were allowed to operate in the dark, and number two, making sure that others like them don't exist. Second on the docket, we had received some complaints from parents that had attended last year's governor's conference for LGBTQ youth. And I'll be crystal clear here today, as I have been in previous committees, I support the governor's LGBTQ conference. I have many friends in that community. I do believe they need a place to go to be able to say things to each other that they don't feel comfortable saying in public. But when you've got parents who are Democrats and they're pro-LGBTQ folks that are saying that there was some content at the conferences that wouldn't pass a rated R movie muster, and these were issues that weren't without parental consent and taxpayer dollars were involved. So our committee is tasked with not shutting down the conference and not demonizing anybody, but making sure that the 95% of the conference that does do good things, it's what's put forth next year, and not the 5% that was inappropriate.
So tell me a little bit, because no, I don't think a lot of people know about that oversight committee. So kind of tell me the process of how you will go about investigating or reviewing those two topics.
Well, the Oversight Committee is tasked with reviewing all layers of government when there's potential fraud, abuse, misuse, et cetera. And so when we have an investigation like this, the first step we take is, who should our first hearing involve? And in the case of the Keokuk boarding school, we decided that the state attorney general, DHS, and the Department of Ed should come in and answer some questions because the Keokuk school had been avoiding them. But also at the local level, we've invited the local sheriff and the local county attorney. So from there, we'll discern out of those 5 interviews in a public hearing in the middle of March where to go next. But typically our first step is identify who to bring in, who needs to answer what questions, and then if another hearing needs taking place after that, we do that. The final end game is to make recommendations. Do we need legislation? Is there something that the Oversight Committee needs to recommend to put into the code? And so that's how we resolve these things, is find out who's responsible and then make recommendations.
So Bobby, what is the Oversight Committee, what's it limited to? I mean, can it be anything that's happening up there that the Oversight Committee reviews, or?
We are by code, we are allowed to look into anything that we deem to be of importance to the people. And so we try not to overuse that power.
Yeah.
In this particular instance, there actually aren't taxpayer dollars involved in the Midwest Academy, but state agencies were involved. In the case of the LGBTQ conference, taxpayer dollars were involved. So statutorily, we're not technically limited, but I try to make sure that my litmus test for if there's something for oversight is it going to help the people of Iowa, because that's what I was elected to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. That particular committee I find very interesting.
We're also funnel proof and we meet year round.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting committee.
Eminent domain, I know that's a big hot issue with a lot of cities and state. So why don't you go through the things that you're talking or referencing or that are important, relevant to eminent domain in this session. So.
Well, there's actually 4 live rounds. I've said before that Iowa, unfortunately, is a bit of a mecca for drawing those that want to abuse private property rights. And you've got 4 live rounds. You've got the Balkan Pipeline, which there's a pending hearing with the IUB. They're going to make a determination whether they get eminent domain. You've got the Rock Island Clean Line, which wishes to transport wind energy across the state. Both private companies, by the way, not utilities. Number 3, you have the continual fight with the lake down in Clark County. And then number 4, I actually had a meeting with the DOT about some ways to improve their tools when they condemn for roads, which we all agree is a necessary time for eminent domain. But the Oversight Committee has also been very involved in those issues. Any eminent domain legislation has been coming out of that committee, and our different investigative panels have been reviewing and keeping on top of each of these individual issues.
Very good. The other one that I want to talk to you about a little bit, and I know that's very important to everybody in there, no matter what their other responsibilities are, is the budget. I mean,
absolutely.
And I know you guys, your session seems to be moving along at a pace where you guys are going to get out on your deadline. Why don't you talk a little bit about the budget and then tell me if you think you guys are going to.
Sure. Our plan is to get on our deadline.
Right. Which is what, by the way?
The end of April.
End of April. Okay.
What actually happens in the next 2 months, I think, will dictate that, but I do think it's a real possibility. And Iowa's been a leader nationally. We have been, for the 5th year in a row, a state that balances our budget. We spend less money than we take in, we pay down debt, and we return money to the taxpayer whenever possible. And it's imperative to me, it's critical and it's crucial that we spend less money than we take in and that our budget is fiscally sound, because that affects everything. Whether it's education, the judicial budget, agriculture, economic development, we need a sound budgeting principle to stand on so that people can feel comfortable that when we make a promise to education, we make a promise to appropriate some funds, that they know that those funds are going to be there and that they can count on them.
Anything else that you have that you want to comment on as far as what's going on up at the State House that is of interest to you or maybe of interest to our folks that are tuning in?
Well, we have 2 weeks left before the second funnel. What that means is that every Senate file that came out has to pass a House committee to stay alive and vice versa. Yeah. So I think what you'll see these next 2 weeks is a lot of committee work and a lot of floor work, because then once that second funnel deadline hits, then we have the rest of the session to debate, to make the deals, to pass things into law. But if it doesn't pass one of those first 2 funnel deadlines, then the issues are dead. However, in the Capitol, nothing's ever truly gone, because I think you'll see a lot of times things creep up in the form of amendments to budgets, amendments to bills, and so it'll be interesting to see what ends up making it to the final cut.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming here today, Bobby, and our guest today has been Bobby Kaufmann, Republican from Wilton. We appreciate his time and his efforts up at the State House, and stay tuned for another episode of Capitol